On the 8th of June, 1755, three Royal Navy ships of the line fell on an equally sized French fleet off Cape Ray, Newfoundland. What followed was a battle that has been all but forgotten in the greater narrative of history, overshadowed by the battles on the American continent. But it really should be remembered, as the action of June 8th, 1755 would be part of the escalation that would turn a colonial border dispute into a global conflict that would put France on the path to revolution, the 13 colonies on the path to independence, and the British Empire on the path to building the largest dominion the world has ever seen. The events that would lead to British Admiral Edward Boscawen and French Admiral Toussaint Hocquart facing each other in the Gulf of St. Lawrence would occur not on the ocean, but in the middle of the colonial frontier, and would involve a name that you will recognize as you didn't recognize the two admirals: George Washington. Far from the American general or the first president, and he was a young upstart redcoat who would find himself at odds with a French force in a valley fortification that was hastily thrown up and gave all the advantage to the French and their native allies. The Battle of Fort Necessity and the earlier Battle of Jumonville Glen would see war break out between British and French forces in the colonial frontier of the Ohio River Valley. Called the French and Indian War due to the primary opponents to the British and colonial forces being the French and their Native American allies, the events that Washington and others set in motion would eventually lead to a much larger conflict. When word of these battles reached London, the government decided to send regulars to occupy the French Fort Duquesne. But word leaked to France, and so French troop convoys were also rushed to the New World. The British, who in turn became aware of the French troop movements across the Atlantic, deployed Vice Admiral Edward Boscawen and a fleet of 11 ships of the line to the Gulf of St. Lawrence to stop any French convoy headed to Quebec City. Boscawen was a career Navy man, joining the Royal Navy as a boy at age 12, and he served in the War of Jenkins' Ear, the War of Austrian Succession, and now in this escalating border dispute. Boscawen patrolled along the southern shore of Newfoundland, soon joined by another 7 ships under Admiral Holbourne. The French fleet, under Admiral Dubois de la Motte, I'm sorry, French speakers, Admiral Dubois de la Motte, generally avoided these British ships. The British Navy was still 50 years away from true naval domination at the Battle of Trafalgar, though. Many French ships landed troops at Louisbourg, and some eluded Boscawen to reach Quebec. However, 3 ships, the Dauphin Royal, the Alcide, and the Lys, serving as a troop transport, sailing en flute as the French called it, with reduced armament under the command of Toussaint Hocquart on the Alcide, I don't know, became separated from the rest of the French forces in the fog. When they spotted sails, it was 3 ships of the British squadron. Let's take a look at the order of battle on each side. Under the command of Vice Admiral Edward Boscawen, the Royal Navy ships consisted of HMS Dunkirk, a 60-gun fourth-rate ship built in 1754 and was essentially brand new, being built at Woolwich Dockyard. HMS Defiance, a 58-gun fourth-rate ship built in 1744 in Deptford, and HMS Torbay, a 90-gun second-rate ship launched as HMS Neptune in Deptford in 1683. Under the command of Captain Toussaint Hocquart, the Marine Royale forces consisted of the Dauphin Royale, a 74-gun ship built in Brest in 1735, the Alcide, Hocquart's own ship, a 64-gun ship built in Brest in 1741, and the Lys, with reduced armament of 22 guns, and carrying soldiers of the Regiment de la Reine and Regiment de la Languedoc, 8 companies in total. Despite the hostilities of the previous year, the two formations fell in line on June 8, 1755. Hocquart called to Commander Richard Howe aboard the Dunkirk, "Are we at war or at peace?" To which Howe responded, "At peace, at peace." What followed was a brief discussion, and then, well, the British opened fire. Alcide returned fire and fought for 5 hours against the 3 British warships, but was forced to strike her colors alongside the Lys. Dauphin Royale escaped into the fog. The British suffered 7 killed and 25 wounded. The French lost 2 ships, 130 killed or wounded, and 2,000 captured. This was but one encounter that the British and French had in the period, and harassment of French shipping led to the declaration of war in the spring of 1756. This was the start of the 7 Years' War, a war that would soon see Russia, Austria, Spain, Sweden, Portugal, Prussia, Native American confederacies, and many others fight across the globe for the next 7 years. The French and Indian War becoming just one theater of the larger conflict. The prisoners captured on the 8th of June 1755, who were intended to serve in New France, were held in Halifax on George's Island and were treated as POWs. The 7 Years' War would see the British accrue a large war debt, and since the war was started in and fought mostly to the benefit of the 13 colonies, they would increase taxes in the region. This, of course, would not sit well with the American colonists, who would declare independence in 1776, and the French would throw their support behind them in 1778. Their own debt propelling them to revolution in 1789 and the eventual rise of Napoleon in 1798. On board the Alcide and Lys, 10,000 scalping knives were found, meant for Acadians and natives under Micmac chief. Oh boy, I apologize again. Micmac chief Cope? It's popping up on the screen. And Acadian Beausoleil? They were meant for the Native Americans in their ongoing war known as Father Latos War. Latotras. It's on the screen. And finally, I'm using notes, this was the third time that Hocquart became Boscawen's prisoner, having been captured in a frigate action in 1744 and in the First Battle of Cape Finisterre during the War of Austrian Succession, before being captured on the Alcide on the 8th of June, 1755. And I hope you all enjoyed, despite my horrible pronunciation, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.